Watching Connect the World, I'm Lynda Kinkade. Welcome back. Well, Venice has endured another day of exceptionally high tides, just days after devastating flooding inundated the Italian city. This was the scene in St. Mark's Square again today. Officials closing the iconic plaza ahead of a high tide of 150 centimetres. That is lower than Tuesday's historic flooding, which was 187 centimetres, the worst the city has seen in 50 years. Well, the damage bill is estimated to be more than $1 billion. CNN's Scott McClean joins us now live from Venice, and it's just incredible seeing those pictures there behind you, Scott. Another high tide. Just take us through what people are saying there about this.
Hey, Lynda. Yeah, it has been a pretty tough week for Venice. As you said, there was another exceptionally high tide today, and this is all the while Venetians are still cleaning up from the last two.
High tide on Saturday was actually welcome relief for Venetians struggling with the worst flooding in half a century. It filled historic St. Mark's Square, but was not enough to do more damage than already done. This cafe, opened for the first time since Tuesday's high water mark, sent more than a foot of water inside, enough to break the dishwasher and the fridge. This waiter told us, "We are Venetians. We roll up our sleeves and start working again. Venice is our lady. We will protect her." Meanwhile, at St. Mark's Basilica, the water at the door didn't knock before entering, but it still got their attention.
We have more than this level of water.
It's not uncommon for water to enter the outer atrium. There's even a special drainage system to handle it. But Pierpaolo Campestrini says it was just the second time there's been significant flooding in the main chamber. 10 centimeters there and another meter in the crypt. The water came and went quickly, but the salt in the water stays in the 900-year-old walls much longer, eating away at the marble and brick near the floor and even on the mosaic ceiling.
And that's the damage.
And that's the damage there.
The basilica has survived centuries of threats, but nothing like the one it faces today.
It's harder to defend the basilica from the risk of climate change than it is from invading armies.
Exactly. We went to the moon, and we should be able also to defend this basilica from the climate changes, and we will.
Just down the canal, you can still hear the sound of music at one of the most important conservatories in Italy. But the orchestra is being conducted by students and volunteers working to dry out some 50 meters worth of bookshelves that ended up partially submerged. But why were they ever on the ground floor?
This could have been easily prevented.
It's the first question. But the problem is that we had with this floor of the first floor was not strong enough to keep the weight. So that's why we had to move them downstairs.
The most valuable books and manuscripts are being packed up, sent away to be frozen to stop the fragile, historic pages from deteriorating. They'll only be thawed out when the conservatory has the money to restore them, not anytime soon. Back at St. Mark's, they're preparing for their first Mass in almost a week, praying the worst has come and gone as they wait for what's forecast to be another exceptionally high tide on Sunday.
So there is still water here in St. Mark's Square, though it should recede over the next couple of hours. There are some high tides expected this week, though there'll be enough to flood this square. They won't be enough to cause any more damage than has already been done. Now, all of this flooding is quite frustrating for Venetians. You don't have to look hard to find one who will tell you that all of this seems preventable. That's because Italian authorities have been working on a barrier project, a hydraulic barrier project to prevent those exceptionally high tides from flooding the city. It's been going on for 15 years now. The problem is it's been plagued by mismanagement and delays and corruption. The current mayor told me yesterday that he understands the frustration of the city, but says this project, which is called Mose, is still the city's best hope for the future, Lynda.
All right. Scott McClean, good to have you there for us in the flooded city of Venice. We will speak to you again next hour. Thank you. Well, I want to get the latest forecast from meteorologist Alison Chinchar, who joins us now live. Good to see you, Alison. Just explain what people can expect there in the coming days.
Yeah, so good to see you too. Yeah, the good news is the worst of it really has kind of crested at this point. We really should start to see things begin to decrease over the next 24 hours as that storm system finally begins to push itself away from this region. The problem is there's another system on the heels of that. And the question really becomes, where do these levels go? Because when you look back at the last week, look at some of these numbers. There's 187 centimeters. That's from last Tuesday when we really hit the peak of this particular event. But you've also had 3 other where you can see the red color there. That's where we're talking about another very high level. Now, the good news is going forward, we're talking most of these to be between about 95 to 110 centimeters. But keep in mind, that still puts them at that very high tide level, level 4 out of 5. So again, we need to start seeing these numbers coming back down. But Lynda, it may still take several more days before we can finally see those numbers coming back down to where they need to be.
Excellent. And Alison, I just want to move on to Australia now because obviously we continue to see those bushfires right across the east coast. There was that major fire in Bundaberg in the state of Queensland. And of course, further south, we've been watching that unprecedented number of fires tear across New South Wales. What can you tell us about the conditions that firefighters will be facing?
Right, so the good news is they really have been able to make big strides in the containment numbers in the past few days. The real big goal is getting them fully contained. The question is, can they do that before conditions start to deteriorate in the coming days? For Queensland, we have about 75 wildfires out there right now. In New South Wales, we're looking at about 54 of those bushfires. The concern is going forward. Today and into Monday, the winds are starting to increase, but not too high. The real big concern becomes Tuesday, Wednesday, and especially Thursday of this upcoming week. Look at some of these numbers, 50, 60, even 80 kilometers per hour. That's when the real danger really starts to tick in. So the question becomes, can they get those fires fully contained before we start to see those winds increase by the end of the upcoming week? However, in the short term, the big concern is going to be the temperatures. For Sydney and Canberra, again, we're talking about high temperatures, Lynda. 28 in Sydney. The peak will be about 37 on Tuesday. So they've got very hot conditions and also dry conditions even before the winds begin to increase at the end of the week.
37, that is a hot one, and not even summer yet. Alison Kinkade, good to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Well, a quick update on one of our top stories in Hong Kong. Several pro-democracy lawmakers have arrived at the Polytechnic University to mediate between protesters and police. A tense standoff and skirmishes have been going on there for hours. Demonstrators have been hurling bricks and petrol bombs. Police have been responding with tear gas and water cannons. And Polytechnic University officials accuse protesters of stealing dangerous chemicals from labs and damaging the school. Well, Hong Kong police have also fired tear gas, as I mentioned, at protesters at another location in the city as well.